It's now time for an example to practice the concept of a proxy provider. We are going to look at what we have said so far using the counter and a class called translations in the official documentation. For counter, we'll deal with the implementation of a method that defines a counter variable and an incremental function in the stateful widget and reflect the changed value on the UI using setState, and a separate change notify implementation. This is the basic type of translations class. We are going to make small changes depending on how it's implemented. The basic type consists of a constructor that takes an integer type argument and a title getter. After creating the Provider Overview 15 app, install the Provider package in the pubspec.yaml file and comment out include line in the analysis options.yaml file so that the default lint rule is not applied. In the Provider Overview 15 app, we are going to test various usages for ProxyProvider, ProxyProvider 0, change notify ProxyProvider. We will start with the basic skeleton of the app already made. Let's take a look at main.dart first. My homepage consists of buttons that go to the page to test each usage. After examining why ProxyProvider is needed, and after examining the usage of ProxyProvider update callback and the usage of ProxyProvider create and update callback, we'll look at the combinations of a ProxyProvider and ProxyProvider, change notify provider and change notify ProxyProvider, and change notify provider and ProxyProvider. All buttons are placed as children of list view. To center them, I set the list view's shrink wrap property to true. Default value of the shrink wrap property is false. What happens when I comment this out? I'll comment it out and save. Even though the list view is placed inside the center widget, it is displayed starting from the top of the screen. This is a very useful tip when using list view to display multiple text form fields and submit button. Since all the buttons are almost identical, I will explain only one. Each button is an elevated button, and a new line is inserted in the middle of the sentence so that the button's title can be displayed in two lines. The font size was set to 20.0, and text align.center was given to center the text. And when you click the button, you go to that page. Currently, these 6 pages all have the same code. The only difference is that the widget's name is different. Since all pages are the same, we'll only see one page, Why ProxyProvider. Let's go to whyproxyprovider.dart under the Pages folder. Since we are going to use the provider, we import the provider. And there is a translations class at the top. When instantiating the translations class, we receive an integer type underscore value and defines a title getter to expose a string called uclicked_value times. Next, I created a stateful widget called yProxyProv. Declare an integer type counter variable and give it an initial value of 0. And by defining a void type increment function, every time it is called, the counter variable in setState is incremented by 1 to reveal the UI. At this time, try to output the counter value to the screen as well. In the build function, the scaffold is returned. The title of that bar is yProxyProvider, and the body is given the center widget with the column widget as a child. The main axis alignment is center so that the children of the column widgets are center aligned. The first child is a stateless widget called Show Translations, which is currently a text widget that displays a static text you clicked 0 times. Next, I gave a size box of height 20.0, and finally, I gave a stateless widget called Increase Button. Increase Button is a widget that displays an elevated button. It receives the void callback increment defined in yProxyProvider as an argument and executes the incremental function whenever the button is pressed. It is composed of very plain widgets. Now that we have looked at the skeleton of the app, we'll start with yProxyProvider and implement it one by one.